Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder on this beautiful last day of January. Hello, my name is Tom Degenwolf, and I will be the worship leader for today's service. We welcome all at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. If you're a new visitor, please email our office manager, Amy Zen, and let us know how you found us. You will find her email in the Zoom chat. Our church website has a great deal of information about the church and activities. You can see that link in the chat as well. Now, please ensure your microphones remain muted and join us for worship.
Hear these words of invocation from my friend and colleague, Reverend Kathleen McTeague, who this week announced her retirement as the president of our UU Service Committee. Quote, "Into this home, we bring our hunger for awakening. We bring our compassionate hearts and a will towards justice. Into this home, we bring the courage to walk on after hard losses. Into this home, we bring our joy and gratitude for ordinary blessings. By our gathering, we bless this place. In its shelter, we know ourselves blessed." Unquote. Blessed be. May it be so. And thank you, Kathy, for all your service to our movement.
If you have a personal chalice or candle near your computer, please get ready to light it. We invite you to type into the chat box where your chalice is lit, the street or neighborhood, or what city if you're joining us from outside Boulder County. Now I'd like to introduce our chalice lighter for this morning, Susan Secord.
Good morning. My name is Susan Secord, and I've been a member at UUCB since 2009 when my own UU journey began. I was drawn to this faith by all of our 7 principles, but most especially by the first, second, and the 7th. The respect for the worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. It was that 7th principle which initially compelled me and our other church members to start the Climate Action Ministry in 2012. We were motivated by a profound concern for all people, indeed all forms of life, and for future generations who would bear the greatest brunt of the impacts of global warming. If you've been around UUCB, perhaps you've participated in some of our programs and actions over the past 8 years, and we thank you. But in 2020, our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, took on a greater urgency for many of us as we saw unarmed Black men and women murdered in their communities by police and others. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Elijah McClain, to name just a few. Their unjust deaths have called on all of us to look more deeply into our own complicity in our country's 400 years of systemic racism and the violence against Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. Our Climate Action Ministry members have been looking more deeply as well at the relationship between systemic racism and the impacts of climate change and industrial pollution. Those relationships are very real and have a long history. We're very much in the beginning stages of educating ourselves, and today I invite you to consider exploring with us the theme of climate justice is racial justice. Please stay tuned for events and actions, including joining us for a short conversation during this morning's coffee hour. So today I light this chalice with gratitude for our faith's commitment to our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, and for all the ways that we live into that commitment.
We now invite all those gathered in your various locations to join together in fellowship and community as we all say aloud our congregation's covenant.
We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
And in this deep connection with all of life, let us take a pause to tune in to our own joys and concerns. What is on your mind this morning? What is on your heart today? In the quiet of your own thoughts, I invite you to lift up all that is weighing on you, your grief, your anxieties and worries and pains. Whatever it is, let us hold this and each other in silence. Let us also turn our minds and hearts to those that we love, holding them with love, acknowledging their painful challenges and sufferings. And I invite you now to share your concerns in the chat box. I will hold up some of them, but know that all of us will be held on our hearts. those we are remembering, those who we have lost in these months, now almost a year, when we cannot even gather to mourn them. Becky is remembering her son's mother-in-law who passed yesterday after a long bout with Alzheimer's, and we all send our love to that hurting family. More loss. Samantha is remembering a dear friend's mother who died on Thursday. Worried about the future of our republic, how we will continue to move together as a democracy. As we see some getting vaccinated, we know some who need it are not finding a way to gain access yet, and we hold all those who are fighting against an impossible bureaucracy. I invite you to keep posting, keep sharing, keep knowing that whatever is on your heart, whether it's ready to be shared or not, we are here to walk with you and to love you. We also offer love and witness to those who are experiencing great joys in this moment. And I invite you to bring that joy into your heart, remembering those things for which you are grateful for, that which is bringing you joy. And please share that with us too. We need it more than more than we ever do. Right now, we need to remember why we should be smiling and laughing and feeling hopeful. Yes, our wise leaders, absolutely, Heidi. Michiel has returned home safely from his last deployment. Elliot turning 21 this week. We got a bunch of birthdays. Owen, 7th birthday. Mary making truffles with her daughter. That sounds positively wonderful. Janelle's niece's 9th birthday. And we have Groundhog Day coming up, although I believe we've been living that one for about a year now. But take a chance this next week to laugh, to giggle at something, just for the joy of it. We need that so badly right now. For all those receiving vaccine shots number 1, and maybe even some getting that 2nd shot already, we are so happy to hear that. Hope to follow you soon. The weather. Thank you, Mary. Such a beautiful sunshiny day, as was yesterday. With joy, we celebrate all of this and all that is not yet shared with us, that we may not even know about yet. There's joy waiting right around the corner that some of us don't even know is coming. And for all these blessings and concerns, as well as those that remain silently on our heart, we hold this compassionate space with love. And I thank you all for the ways you continue to bless each other. And we're going to transition now into a short time of silence, of prayer, of meditation. I invite you to close your eyes gently, just noticing your breath, finding an inner stillness. And as you do, I invite you to let your imagination play with this thought. How would your life be different if no one expected anything of you based on your gender identity? I know this is no small question, but in the safety and magic of this silence, let your mind imagine the possibilities for a moment. Your life with no gender-based expectations. Blessed be. May it be so.
Gender is a shell game. What is a man? Whatever a woman isn't. What is a woman? Whatever a man is not. Tap on it and it's hollow. Look under the shells. It's not there. Naomi Alderman, The Power.
On the masculinity and gender scale, beard aside, I've mostly existed closer to Daniel Radcliffe and Pee Wee Herman than Arnold Schwarzenegger and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I don't mean just in the physical ways my body did or did not live up to the masculine ideal, but even more so the emotional ways I didn't conform to the proper male template. As a child, I was always aware of other people's feelings and naturally drawn towards nurturing those who were sad or hurting. While I've always enjoyed sports, I enjoy art too, and when it came to fighting, I was a pacifist long before I knew the word. Now, I've rarely had problems fitting in around other male-identified folk of whatever type they were, but I was also aware from a young age that there were things about me that didn't fit well with the expectations society had for me and my physically male body. But being a kid, I could get away with being a compassionate and sensitive boy for a while. And while I could sense a certain underlying tension from adults when I would greet my childhood male friends with hugs and tell them I loved them, or notice weird looks when I would dress in girls' clothing without a fuss when playing dress up, I was too naive to put it all together. But naivete can only last so long, and it certainly can't withstand the unstoppable cultural force of the American public school system. Within a few weeks of leaving the relative safety and serenity of my elementary school and entering the new world of junior high, I drew the unfortunate and completely unwanted attention of several guys looking for easy prey. Boys that were like me, somewhere outside the safe bounds of masculinity. The culling of the weak from the strong began with bumping, pushing, and jostling in the hallways between classes, and then slowly grew to taunts and name-calling on the playground. And then, somewhere in the second or third month of the school year, it suddenly escalated into physical attacks that could lurk anywhere. I was sure that I deserved the abuse for all the ways I was learning that I fell short of being a man. And how did I know that improperly performing my gender role was the cause of my bullying? Because it would be shouted at me as I was being beaten up. The incident I remember the clearest was one of the very first times. I was coming down to the cafeteria for lunch and was met in the hallway by my main bully. He demanded my lunch money, and when I refused and ran, he chased me. And I made the tactical mistake of ducking into the boys' bathroom. He caught me there, punched me in the stomach, took my money, and then knocked me to the ground. I began crying, and not just a little. My tearful reaction to his attack seemed only to make him angrier, and he started kicking me hard in my stomach and ribs and yelling at me, "Stop crying, you girl. Boys don't cry. Stop crying, you girl. Boys don't cry." Each declaration of my failure to properly be a man accentuated by a thump in my ribs from his foot. When he was finally done and had left, I remained frozen on the ground crying, not sure what to do. Almost immediately, two girls I had known since kindergarten came into the boys' bathroom to pick me up and put me together. And while it was an incredible kindness I will never forget, it also reinforced the emasculating message that was ringing in my ears and screaming in my soul. "Stop crying, you girl. Boys don't cry." It was clear in that moment, as these kind girls held me, I wasn't a boy, let alone a man, which left me wondering, what was I? Beginning the night after that first attack and continuing for many nights after, as I lay in my bed alone in the darkness, I taught myself how to stop crying. And this was not an intellectual pursuit, but rather a physical and emotional one. I dropped deep into my own body, into my core, into the center of my soul where inner feelings become outward emotions and hidden sadnesses burst into public tears. I studied the movement of this inner process and learned how to gum it up, how to slow it down, and eventually how to wall it up and turn it off completely, so that I could be exposed to all manner of terrible things and manage to not shed a single tear or show the least bit of emotion. By just the end of that first junior high school year, I got to the point where I could completely disengage my emotions from any outward sign of feeling them and move through the world like the strong, insensitive, unfeeling, emotionless, and powerful man that the world wanted me to be. And just like that, the bullying stopped. Of course, just because the bullying stopped didn't mean that everything got better. In fact, it was the beginning of some of the most lonely, isolated, and painful years of my life. I spent a lot of time struggling with the damage it did to my soul to stop feeling and crying. Walling up those feelings came at a very real price for me. In relationships with my family that became strained, in a need to numb nameless pain that I was no longer allowing myself to consciously be aware of. in a separation from who I knew I was and wanted to be. It's taken me decades of extremely conscious spiritual and psychological work with the help of trained professionals and the grace of the loving God I believe in to undo most of what I made my body do to survive that time. But it's work that will never be complete for me. I feel myself trying to stop crying right now. And part of that work is to pay it forward, to help the people behind me to live a life more free from gender and genital related expectations, to help kids and young people growing up today and adults who never had a chance to be whoever they feel naturally called to be. As the Me Too movement has gained momentum, our country has spent a lot of time talking about male culture and locker room behavior over the past years. And I've heard stories from all of the female-bodied people in my life about things that have been said and done to them that are beyond sad and horrifying. And what has become obvious to me is that the idea of masculinity and manhood that exists in the patriarchal society that we have lived with for most of human history is toxic for everyone. It's obviously toxic for the female-bodied people who have to be subjected to the treatment made acceptable by this vision of all powerful men who work hard and so can take, have, and do whatever they please with other people's bodies and lives. It's toxic for children who are told not to bring feelings and emotions to a male-bodied parent and are denied a gentle and safe experience with a primary caregiver. And it's toxic to male-bodied people who have to deny parts of who they are in order to conform to the expectations of others or face the violent and isolating consequences. I would like to tell you a beautiful story about a male-bodied person that in my time of distress identified me as someone who needed help and connected me to the life-saving resources that I desperately needed. But I can't tell you that story because no such thing occurred. In truth, I wandered in numbness for the better part of the next decade, until by chance, I signed up for Women's Studies 101 in college. And early on in that course ran smack into this quote from American feminist luminary Bell Hooks, who wrote, quote, "The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. If an individual is not successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem," unquote. It was all I could do not to burst into tears in the middle of the classroom as I finished reading those words. But my years of training once again were put to use, and I swallowed hard and pushed the emotions away. But at the same time, I felt exposed for all the world to see, vulnerable, naked. This was me Bell Hooks was talking about. I had fallen prey to this very thing, to these very rituals of power that assaulted my self-esteem until I did engage in an act of psychic self-mutilation. I had conformed to the patriarchy. Along with feeling exposed, however, I also felt a jolt of hope, perhaps even sensed a hint at a path towards freedom. What if I wasn't meant to be trapped in this numb shell, radiating unconscious anger and bathing in isolating self-loathing? Maybe I was meant to be something far more interesting and complicated. A person with male genitalia that also had emotions and was compassionate and loving and felt things and even allowed themselves to be vulnerable in public. Make no mistake about it, feminism saved my life. And of course, since that time, my eyes have continued to be opened wider and wider to realize that as a cisgendered, straight, white, and for the time being at least able-bodied male, I had it easier on this journey than almost anyone else in terms of expectations. If this was hard for me, what was it like for so many who were less privileged? For those that were attracted to the same gender or felt they existed somewhere between the two poles of male and female that I had naively assumed were the only options? I've come to realize that so many of us humans are walking around in bodies that are absolutely perfect, except for the fact that we don't want to live up to the cultural and societal gender-based expectations for them. In Unitarian Universalism, rather than place the source of evil in some non-human deity like the devil, we talk a lot about the structures and systems that keep people in bondage and unable to live fully into who they are, which can feel overly intellectual and hard to get your mind around. And so my story today about my journey to understand what being a man means for me is an attempt to illustrate one form that those structures and systems can take. When I used to hear people say that they kept us in place or that something was done by the man, I thought that perhaps there really were people whose job it was to make bad things happen. But the truth, as I've discovered, is much more insidious. There isn't a person who holds an official role in perpetuating all that goes into the patriarchy. Rather, in small to major ways, it lives in unexamined parts of all of us. It certainly was alive and well in me. And so truly, the path of defeat for the patriarchy also lies within each of us. And the more we spend the real time and effort it takes to consciously explore why we feel the way we do about gender and bodies, the more we can start to unwind our unconscious minds from the behaviors and actions that we ourselves contribute to this process. About a year ago, I was surfing through Facebook during a break from something, and suddenly my eyes fell upon a piece of poetry. It read, quote, "You ever feel like you've cried for minutes, for hours, for days, mother effer for weeks, for months, for years, yet no tears have ever been shed. Enough said," unquote. Now, I'm not particularly a poetry person, and this one would not have normally caused me to pause. But the author of this particular piece of poetry was not just anyone, at least to me. A few years ago, on somewhat of a whim, I had accepted a friend request on Facebook from my main bully, the one who had, among many other things, attacked me in the bathroom all those years ago in junior high school. Now, decades later, he still lives in our hometown. He also writes poetry, and this was from him. A poem about repressed tears, about unspoken sadness that has most likely built up in him since before he even began attacking me for my tears. No doubt, passed along to him from other men. As I read it over and over again, Bell Hook's words rang in my ears. As hard as it was for me to accept, my bully was a victim of this terrible patriarchy as well. My friends, it's true. Not one of us can be free until we all are. Today, this morning, I ask you not simply to imagine a world without these gender expectations, but to find within yourself the place that needs transforming and to continue that work for every single one of us. May it be so. Amen and Ashe.
This morning's offering will benefit UUCB's ministries and programs. Thank you for your generous support. You can make a donation now using the link posted in our chat by sending a check to UUCB or scanning the QR code on the next slide with your mobile phone. Please be as generous as you can. We will now receive the offering. May our gifts be used to enact justice, bringing peace and love to the world.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way.
As we prepare our hearts and minds to return to the world, I invite you to hear these words of Thomas Merton, who said, quote, "We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge, spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race. Not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep, elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been. A revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something we have chosen, nor is it something we are free to avoid." Unquote. May we continue to build a new way together. May it be so. Ashe.
Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way. Go your way in peace, wander as you may. Blessed is the path you take, may love guide you on your way.
We invite you to stay with us in our Zoom rooms for a time of online fellowship and discussion. If you'd like to learn more about the exciting things happening in our Climate Action Ministry, please stay in our main Zoom lobby for the Climate Action Spotlight Focus. Barb and Fred are here to tell us how this is going to work.